Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to our webinar. Today we have Andy Jennings, our Senior Solution Architect here at CDW, and he will just be speaking about how CDW can help you with your cloud journey. So passing it over to Andy.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending. As Dasha mentioned, I'm a Senior Solution Architect, here at CDW, and I focus most of my time on Azure Cloud. So I've been working on Azure since about 2011 and have done a number of, or assisted a number of customers in moving to the cloud. So the one thing I wanted to start with is you may have heard that there's many different frameworks that out there that people are using to move to the cloud. There's the cloud adoption framework from Microsoft. There's a cloud adoption framework from AWS. There's a cloud adoption framework from Google. All of those do similar things. However, what we've done here at CDW is we've actually kind of combine them all, because really they all basically do the same thing. So we have our own cloud decision framework, right? So the first thing we do with clients is we help them define a strategy. So we go into their environment and do what's called a cloud assessment. And the cloud assessment actually helps you understand what it would take to actually move to the cloud and the cost associated with moving to the cloud, which is a huge piece of when moving to the cloud. And then basically we go in and start working with the customer to plan what it is they want to move, what the changes to the environment will be, whether or not we're going to re-architect a solution or just move it as it is, leave it where it is, those types of things. So we want to make sure we have a solid plan in place to help them, the customer, achieve the goal that they're looking for. And then we help them get ready. And this is one of the biggest pieces of moving to the cloud, is building a cloud landing zone. And the cloud landing zone, which I'll get into a little bit deeper later, but it really builds the foundation of your cloud deployment. So it sets up the networking, it sets up the all of the security, cost controls and things like that in the cloud as you move forward. It gets you totally ready to migrate. And then once we're there, then we have a plan in place, and then we just implement the roadmap that we've helped design with the customer. And then as you move forward throughout your cloud journey, there's always innovation and changes and modernizing and updating applications as you go. And so that's really what we call the cloud decision framework. And what this helps you do is set a governance, solid governance for your cloud, and then gives you the ability to really manage it ongoing, right? So that's the beauty of that. So then there's a couple of different ways to actually move to the clouds. One is really going straight in, where you see on-prem, we set up some governance, and then we go straight to pilot and migrating. And that's really more of we're going to cloud, there's nothing left on premise, we're just moving and going straight there, right? The next one is hybrid or multi-cloud. And this is where we see most of our customers living today. So basically we need to assess what is going to be left on premises, what's going to go to the cloud. Then we do the analysis, build the landing zone, and then execute the migration. So this is really where most customers live. Most customers aren't going directly to cloud and leaving everything, having nothing on premises other than a router. That's not normally. And then as the customer, we go forward with the customer, then they start wanting to accelerate their Azure usage. And by modernizing their applications, perhaps changing to use a PaaS service for web applications. Oops, strange. Perhaps containerizing their applications, right? And then, or building in applications that can automatically scale. And then also providing automated ways of either scaling or building applications or workloads in the cloud. So basically getting more and more deep into the cloud and what the cloud can actually provide for you more than just having a bunch of virtual machines in the cloud. So we were actually starting to really leverage the scalability and the flexibility of the actual cloud. One of the things that we want to mention here as well is that there may be some funding options available for you. Microsoft has a program which I'll refer to later on in this, but basically Microsoft may be able to assist with funding to help you with your cloud journey. So let's talk a little bit about establishing the foundation. So really, this is the biggest part of going to cloud, right? Is planning, ensuring that we know exactly what you have on premises, what the actual business requirements for moving to the cloud are, and ensuring that, you know, we're going to make sure you're successful with the move. And as part of this, we do what's called a server and application assessment. Part of this, we use tools against your environment to understand what the dependencies of all of your systems are, which systems talk to each other the most, and which ones can actually live and reside in the cloud. Sometimes there's certain things that may need to reside on premises, and we need to identify those to ensure that we aren't moving those. They're outside of the plan, because we know they're going to stay on premises. And then the landing zone is the next piece, right? It's basically building that foundation, the actual ability to build your data center in the cloud. That's what basically the landing zone is the basis of the move into the cloud. And so one of the first things that our services team can help you with is what's called a cloud readiness assessment. And basically a cloud readiness assessment is the analyzing your environment, talking to your application owners, ensuring we know what it is that you're looking for the cloud, whether the application can move cleanly into the cloud or whether there has to be modifications to that application before it can move into the cloud. And we do this through this thing called the R factors, right? So this is, are we going to retire an application? Are we going to refactor that application into the cloud, rebuild it, those types of things. So we're going to go through those a little bit later, but in reality, that's when we're identifying where these pieces are going to go. So what we really do is run some tools in your environment for 14 to 30 days because we want to get a sense of how your environment runs over a month period, because people have spikes in their monthly usage, and we want to make sure we're accommodating for that when we're designing the actual services that are going to be in the cloud. Again, we do some stakeholder interviews, and then basically once we have this all baked, we come back and we'll actually present a report showing our findings for that. And that the idea there is that we give you price setting as to how much it will cost you, what we're actually going to modify in the cloud or just move, rehost, they call it. And the idea there is that we have now the basis of what the next step to cloud adoption, right? So that's really where we're at. So once we have done the assessment, the next thing we need to do is actually build that data center in the cloud, right? And that's what the cloud landing zone is about. So basically what we do is we help the customer set up their cloud environment for scale, security, governance, networking, and identity. The cloud landing zone is all about having somewhere to land those applications. And as part of that, we need to actually understand, you know, do you guys need a router in to create that secure connection between your on-premises environment, or is a VPN enough to make that as secure as you need? A lot of clients who are using an on-premises router system like a PAN device or Meraki, they tend to like to use those in the cloud as well. So they have that one place to manage those devices, right? And the nice thing about the landing zone is it doesn't differentiate between whether it's an IaaS or virtual machine type system, or actually platform as a service type system like a SQL database in the cloud. The landing zone is required for all of those features. So some of the design areas are enterprise enrollments. If you're an enterprise customer, we need to take into account how your enterprise agreement actually is leveraged in the cloud, whether we're using a single subscription, whether we're using multiple subscriptions, whether we're using test dev instances, that type of thing. So we need to figure out what's the best hierarchy for your Azure deployment. And then we need to think about identity. This is one of the things I see a lot of clients falling down on, and basically what they've done is they've actually stood up Azure in a way that's not associated with their Office 365 environment. And that can cause issues, because when you're standing up Azure, you really need to plug it into your Office 365 environment. And that way you've pulled in the identities from Office 365, and it gives you a really good base to start, leveraging the groups you already have, the ones you're syncing from on premises, and leverage those in Azure as well to associate permissions in the cloud as well. And then we need to think about how we're going to organize your resources. Are we going to organize them based on application? Are we going to organize them based on the service itself? Like some of our clients like all of their SQL databases in one area of Azure, all their networking resources in one area of Azure. And other ones are all about having all of the resources required for that one particular application all residing together, right? So those are the things we want to talk to you about and understand how it is you want your environment organized. And that way we can build it the way you like it, right? Then we need to configure the networking topology. How are we going to have one big network and one big subnet, multiple subnets? Are we going to have multiple networks? Are we going to have a resource network where your AD resides, all your networking components reside, all that type of stuff, and then peer all of these together, like a hub and spoke style. So again, that's one of the other things that we need to help with the design of your environment. And then the next thing is obviously, once you're in the cloud, we need to figure out a way to ensure that you have business continuity, disaster recovery, backup. How are we going to handle that? So people still need to, everything still needs to run. So we need to have something to be able to recover if there's an issue that happens. Even the cloud's not invulnerable to issues, right? Your app, you may deploy an app and something happens, and obviously you need it to fail over and continue, right? The business needs to run. So that's something that we need to consider as well as part of the landing zone. And then governance. So this is the one where we find most of the time people fall down on. They've looked at moving into the cloud, and it's like, great, okay, it's like VMware. I'm just going to move my virtual machines into the cloud, and I'm good to go. However, there's a whole host of things that need to be thought through. One of the things is the cloud is global, right? So Azure Cloud is a global deployment. Are you allowed to actually deploy stuff outside of Canada? Most of my clients are very, very rigid about, hey, I want my stuff only in Canada, it should not be anywhere else. Other ones are global companies and they don't care. But a lot of times we want to make sure we lock down the data residency to certain areas, right? So if the company is semi-global, say for example, they have some people in UK, some people in Canada, some people in the US, then we want to make sure that we say our data can only reside in these locations. And then what we do is basically work with the team there to turn off those locations, other than the ones that should be available to you. And so when someone were to try to deploy something into an Asia data center, it would just automatically fail. So we want to build those type of policies in. Then we want to build in some cost control policies. So one of the biggest cost control policies that we do is we actually build a policy for which SKUs for virtual machines are available to you. So virtual machines range in price per month from about $26 a month to, there's one crazy one that is $130,000 a month. So what we do is we go through with the client, we work out whether or not they want to leverage, say for example, do you want to leverage Intel, you want to leverage AMD, you not care. If you're a lot of my clients are very Intel friendly, so we basically would eliminate the AMD SKUs. Then we would eliminate certain areas in there to reduce the number of virtual machines that are available. Generally, we try to get the customer down to about 10 different virtual machines, whereas just in the Azure data center in Toronto, there are actually 496 different virtual machine types that are in there. So we want to boil that down and so that we're controlling what we were deploying in there. And again, so when you're trying to deploy something that is not on the approved list, it will fail on deployment, right? So that way we're controlling costs in that manner, right? Then we can also determine other things like what storage types you want to use, a whole host of other things that we use to help with governance. And then what type of deployment options are we going to take, right? So are we going to just lift and shift? Are we going to re-platform? We're going to make changes as we move forward, going into it, right? And then we need to obviously do an operation baseline. So this is what it's going to look like when we finish the landing zone. Is going to be a honestly fairly bare bones network with the domain controller, and then we're ready. We've extended your network into the cloud, so we added Azure as a data center for you, ready for applications to be moved in there. And so definitely we have our services team can definitely come in and help you with that. As it says here, it's the first step that needs to happen before we actually move you. It creates that solid foundation. Increases the velocity of the move into the cloud, the ability to do cost control. We've set governance policies and security for the environment, and then basically set up the best practices of that cloud provider. In this case, it would be Azure, right? So those are the types of things that we do to build this foundation for you in the cloud. And our team is very capable of helping you scope this out to ensure, you know, we've hit all the marks to build that landing zone for you. So once we have the landing zone created, we also need to understand what your cloud readiness is. We've done an analysis on your environment, and we kind of know what it would cost to move you in the cloud, and what we expect that would be. But then we need to perform a bunch of workshops to talk to you about the technical requirements of the application that's moving and what the application owner needs, and all of these things. We need to actually have these conversations with the business to ensure that we're building out a cloud roadmap to get you there, because generally it's not a one and done type of migration to the cloud, right? It's usually iterative. So we actually go in and we actually have a conversation with you about a particular app, and generally when we're building out a cloud roadmap, it's more about the first ones we want to move are the least risky, right? So we don't really want to start moving your financials into the cloud on the first go, right? We want to make sure we're taking things that are a little less risky, move them, and then move up the risk scale as we move you more into the cloud, right? So that's one of the things we want to do here by building this roadmap. We determine which apps have the least impact on your business, up to the ones that have the most impact on your business. And we built that roadmap out accordingly, right? So by the time we're moving your most risky apps, we know that all of the governance policies that we've built, all of the networking and all of the things that are required for that app are solid, right? We've built that 100%, and we've iterated over time to adjust as we go forward. So this is what we were talking about. We'll talk to clients about when we're building the roadmap, is what we're going to do with these applications, right? Are we going to rehost it, right? Are we just going to move it into the cloud? Are we going to replatform it? Does that mean we're going to rebuild it or adjust it to use what's called PaaS resources or more Microsoft managed resources? Are you going to just buy a different product, right? Maybe our suggestion would be, instead of moving that financial app into the cloud, perhaps maybe you should move to a SaaS solution. Maybe it's not an Azure solution, but it might be better for you to go to the SaaS solution rather than managing databases and all those types of things that you may not be front of mind for you. So that's one of the things we want to speak to the business about to make sure that we're looking in the right direction. Then, or do we want to refactor an application? Like, for example, if you have this big monolithic application, is it time now to actually start thinking about breaking that down and containerizing that application, right? So you're going to take better advantage of the cloud. Or are we going to retire this? Is it time to decommission this application? We've all seen lots of stuff running in our environment that maybe one person in the building uses, and it's time to get rid of it. There's no point in actually keeping that around. And then there's the last one, which is retain it. So retaining it, meaning leave it where it is. It works best where it is, right? So that's the best thing to do for that. So we go through these workshops to ensure we understand what's the best place for all of these applications. And this is basically our approach, right? So basically we look at the technical information through the assessment, and then we do application mapping, and the application mapping is really all about understanding which applications talk to which applications. And once we know that, we can determine whether or not they need to move together to the cloud, right? So that's really a big piece. We don't want applications that are very chatty with each other to be one in the cloud and one on premises. We want to make sure that they stay together, right, and move together. That's one of the big things there. And then we also want to do have these workshops about your business, right? So institutional information, we need to understand that as well, right? And how precious is that application to you, right? And then can we classify that application? It is one that will move to the cloud, right? And then that's basically how we combine all of that information to build this roadmap for you to get to the cloud, right? So very, very important. Our team's very good at this. They can basically come in and have those business level discussions, have the technical level discussions. They can talk to both areas of the business quite easily and understand what's best for your business to help you move to the cloud. And then the next step, obviously, is the migration, right? So infrastructure as a service migration, we use Microsoft tooling to actually attach to your VMware systems, your Hyper-V systems, your physical hosts, and then actually extract those virtual machines and workloads and actually replicate them into the cloud. So the beauty of the way we do this is that we're doing it in a non-destructive manner, right? So meaning we're just replicating the instance into the cloud. The one on premises is still running, it's working well. And when we do the cutover, if something were to go wrong, we could immediately cut you back to the on-premises environment. So there's no real risk of downtime when we're actually doing that. Obviously, there will be a few minutes of downtime while we transition from the on-premises one to the cloud. But really, it's about leveraging that roadmap and ensuring that moving the right systems at the right time, and then that way we can accelerate the process of migrating you into the cloud. It's very, very powerful. But we also leverage the same type of technology if we're moving from one cloud to another cloud. In case that we call it a tenant to tenant migration or a cloud to cloud migration. And this way we were doing the same thing. So replicating those systems out of the existing cloud into the Azure cloud. I'm having a conversation with the customer right now about moving out of AWS. And we're leveraging the same technologies, the same steps to get them out of AWS as they would from an on-premise environment. And then we have our cloud migration quick start. And so the idea here is that we actually start, we've worked with you, we've built the landing zone, or we'll do this quickly for you. We'll move you into Azure with just lift and shift only, right? In this particular case, we'll do create a landing zone for you. We'll look at your workloads, and then we will actually start lifting and shifting virtual machines, whether they be Linux or Windows, into the cloud for you. And that way we can get you up and running in the cloud really quickly. And generally we generally use this type of quick start when a client is at some crossroad, shall we say. Like, for example, they're at a hoster and they need their contract at the hoster coming to an end, and they need to move these virtual machines off and into the cloud very quickly. So that basically that's one way, one reason for it, or perhaps their their equipment they're running on is coming end of life and they need to get off it. And so that way we can step this up and do it a bit more quickly, however, still follow the same steps to get the customer there. We won't be doing any refactoring or anything like that as we do these quick starts into the cloud. But again, that's very much available to you. We can definitely come in, and if you're in one of those types of situations, we can definitely help you. And then once you're in the cloud, now we're in the cloud, it's time to actually take advantage of the cloud. The cloud is incredibly versatile. There's a lot of things that you can actually help you do. We can pull in and create automation when we see an issue is detected. We monitor for changes in the environment, things that are going wrong, or even things that just need to scale up. For example, if we wanted to set up a scale up solution, we could set up this automation where the system would detect that, say, for example, a CPU is being overutilized, something was running out of memory, or the HTTP queue length is too long. We would trigger an automation process whereby we would actually deploy another system side by side with that, right? As scaling that system out for, right? That's one of the automations that we can do. We can set up automation where we actually build a new virtual machine through automation, those types of things. And then that moves you into this practical DevOps, right? Where we actually help our customers build deployments through scripting. So we use tooling like Terraform or ARM templates that can actually come with Azure. And we can actually do this DevOps style creation of virtual machines, which gives you this automated way of building. Say, for example, we'll take SQL Server. I wanted my SQL servers all to be built in the same manner with the same settings and all that type of stuff. So, and the same virtual machine type, all of these things. And so what we want to do is set up that up as a script. So when the next time I need to build a SQL server, I just deploy the script and the script will build it for me. Then I fill out the name of the server that I want it to be. And then everything else remains the same, and it just pulls from the script and builds that SQL server for you. Super easy way to actually ensure that you have consistency across your environment. We've all, and perhaps not all, but many of us have inherited environments where every SQL server is deployed differently, right? It's set up in a different manner. Someone else, multiple people have set them up and they have their own method. This way we build that consistency into your environment. And then the next thing is what's the next piece that we need to do for your environment? Do we start taking advantage of containers? Do we start taking advantage of what's called Azure Functions, which is serverless applications that are running in the cloud, where we can leverage these and they get charged for each time they're being used, rather than, running a virtual machine to actually do this particular task that really only is required, rarely. So if you have this task that you need to run, maybe a couple times a day, a couple times a week, you can set that up in a serverless environment and have that just trigger off a date or off of a time or off some other item that once something's posted, for example, there's something posted in SharePoint, for example, there's a new Excel file, the system will see it posted and then act on the fact that there's a new Excel file posted in SharePoint, and then do whatever it needs to do, perhaps post all of that information into a SQL database or whatever that happens to be. But it's not something that gets done constantly, so we don't need a server just sitting there waiting for that to happen. So, like, for example, you might have an FTP server that you just have running, and then that Excel file gets posted in FTP, and then it triggers off something that actually does some work. Whereas, most clients are using SharePoint Online, and they can leverage SharePoint Online and a trigger from Azure Functions to actually accomplish the task for you. And then that way you have no servers whatsoever to manage. And as we move forward towards, this acceleration and optimization, and then as we're moving forward as well, one of the other optimizations we need to look at is cost optimization. So when we first build into the cloud, we can actually understand what we feel is the correct setting or the correct setup of the environment. But as things change in the cloud, we also need to iterate what we're building and the actual cost of what it is we're building, right? So we also need to go back in and look at how those virtual machines are being leveraged, because when you're moving from some older hardware into the cloud, you may right size it at the beginning when we go through the cloud assessment, and then that might not be correct, right? It might be either under or over provision. So you want to go through that, and you constantly want to iterate with the cost measures that are happening in your environment to ensure that you have a solid understanding, and that you're purchasing only what you need to purchase, rather than having these underperforming apps or apps that are just idling, right? And you want to make sure that we're doing. And then there's the well-architected framework. So this is really when we have an application that we've moved into the cloud. Now we need to build some framework around it, right? So now we need to do, as I just mentioned, the cost optimization. How do we understand how much this app is costing me? How can I reduce my overall spend on this particular app, right? Then operational excellence is really about workflow efficiency, understanding how I can recover from a failure, that type of stuff. And that's all about operational excellence. So having a manageable deployment that's based on best practices. And performance, also, as you might imagine, we also need to look at apps based and improve the performance efficiency as best we can over time. Like sometimes that would really require actually coding the application. It might not be just I need a couple more CPUs, right? It might be that the actual SQL query, for example, is not optimal. So we need to think about that. How can we improve a SQL query to speed up my application? Those are things that we need to look at as part of iterating an application in the cloud. And then reliability, we need to understand, hey, does this thing have a single point of failure that we hadn't anticipated when we moved it into the cloud? We need to figure out how we can avoid that single point of failure and ensure that we have business continuity associated with this application, so that if, for example, the Toronto data center for some reason were to be gone on fire, whatever the issue might be, will that fail over, and will my business still be up and running because I can now get to my applications in Quebec City? So we need to think about that. Is that something that we need to set up? Sorry, guys, my phone. And then, of course, we want to set up security and understand how any vulnerabilities that might be there in the deployment. We want to make sure we're filling that hole. So as part of the WellArchitected Framework, we use Security Center in Azure to ensure that we've got these threat detection and vulnerabilities being analyzed, and then basically Microsoft will send back a recommendation on how to actually solve any security issues that you have. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is something that we're very proud of here at CDW, that we've been designated an Azure Expert MSP. And this means, I think that there's 2 or 3 in Canada, I can't remember the number. But basically, Microsoft has tested us on their Azure environment, and they have deemed us to be experts on this environment. And so this gives us the ability to actually leverage some programs with Microsoft that many other partners in Canada are not privy to. But the designation of this, it took quite some time for us to meet this designation. And as I said before, very proud of it and helping our clients get to the cloud. So one of the pieces that actually gives us the ability to get into, is the Azure Migration Program, or the AMP program. And this is the one I mentioned earlier in the discussion about Microsoft perhaps helping fund a migration to the cloud. Right? So Microsoft has a number of workshops that they basically will help fund, and that can take some of the pressure off the actual cost of moving into the cloud. But it gives you the confidence of us coming in to help you. You'll have our hands on to help you. We can work with you so we can upskill you. As part of the deployment through knowledge transfers. A lot of people are a bit hesitant moving into the cloud because they feel that they don't have the skill required. But the idea here is that leverage our team, and our team can come in and actually help you with knowledge transfer on what we're doing when we're moving something into the cloud, and why we're doing this particular thing to move it into the cloud. But again, and then gives you the flexibility to perhaps stretch your budget a bit farther because Microsoft's giving you that assistance to help you move to the cloud. But in conclusion, though, our team is very capable and have done a number of migrations into the cloud, and a number of workshops with clients to ensure that they were meeting the needs of the business, because it's all in the long run, it's all about the business being able to meet the need of either saving money on net new equipment, whether they're going to start leveraging some of the more advanced features in the cloud. All of that, our team's very ready and willing to help you build that out alongside you. And with that, do we have any questions?
I don't currently see any questions in the chat. But if there is anyone who'd like to post anything, now's the chance.
I guess that's it then. I think I'll just conclude then. I think that I'd like to thank everyone for listening, and hopefully we can have a conversation about your migration to the cloud.
Thank you, Andy.